open up with the same regards, being grateful to have these conversations, and now is a good time to have the conversations because we are at a pivotal point in which we're able to create new roadmaps to, quite frankly, very age-old issues that we've faced in education. And we don't want to miss or lose that opportunity to do so. And I think we are starting out in a very positive way. I want to start out with a compliment to the state board. Earlier, President Crawford, you opened up sharing, many of the challenges that we've experienced, but we also recognize that you all experienced those challenges right alongside us. And so, there's not been any group who is a part of the educational infrastructure that haven't experienced this. But I did want to start with a particular positive, and that has been the blueprint leadership on multiple levels. So, and I'll give you an example in terms of how that's benefited Montgomery County and the leadership that's been provided from the state board on that. Really elevating the teaching perspective, I think, has been key in this. Opening up that access to advanced coursework. We've known that access to advanced coursework for some of our students have been an area that has really lagged students in ways that we have not been happy with, but we've been responsible for how we address the roadblocks that have created that. So that's another really significant area. English language learners and really supporting them and being very strategic in how we do that. As that population has grown, I'd probably say in every single one of our jurisdictions in the state of Maryland has been significant. And facilitating the leadership on the Maryland Leads Grant. Thank you. That is huge. And it's huge because it is all about focusing on growing our own. And that really then solves the problem of staff support and retention. And I want to highlight that because that has been a topic of discussion in every school system in the state of Maryland and every school system across the nation this year. And so when we think about that Maryland Leads Grant, it really is about us solving the problem that we're experiencing, yes, because of the labor shortage right now as a result of COVID-19. But quite frankly, this has been a growing problem when we go and look at the universities and enrollment in education over the past years. So I just wanted to make sure I said thank you for your leadership on that, because I think that's a great example of what leads us into the next era of the problem that we need to solve. In Montgomery County specifically, I also want to point out, it was in 2019, the legislation came from MSDE around identifying community schools. And in Montgomery County specifically, we have 26 community schools that were identified based on the governor's criteria of farms. And that was under the funding of Senate Bill 1030. So through having that, we've been able to provide very specific and strategic supports to schools that we have just not been able to do in the past in really targeted spaces and communities that we know have needed something very different from other schools. I'll say being able to be very specific around how we focus on culturally responsive relationship building, how that needs to happen in a community school, involving the community in a very strategic way, how we're providing mental and emotional health in those spaces, trauma-informed practices, physical health, all of those pieces. So I highlight that because those are some true successes that I wanted to start with today so that you could see the difference that you're making in some of our school systems that we want to continue to build on. In terms of, so I'll just pause there because I know my other colleagues may want to have some things, but I do have some thoughts around things that we can do around alignment and communication to help us continue to map some of this work out.
We'll come back to you. Thank you, Dr. McNabb. Dr. Lawson, I believe you wanted to make a comment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Crawford. And to really take probably more of a 30,000, 50,000 view of, I think what we all deal with as leaders is this notion of, if you have a vision and you have a true belief system, trying to extend that vision and belief system to a scale, trying to extrapolate what you value to others. And what I worry sometimes what happens is that in our effort to bring leadership and vision to scale, sometimes people lose patience. And when we start looking at big lifts, big undertakings, whether it's the blueprint or the Leads Grant, these take time. And unfortunately, I think in our profession, in our industry, plans tend to have a 1, 2, 3 year shelf life. And when we look to lift topics into maybe the next generation, just understand that along the planning journey, we need to consider that, and that we give these heavy topics their due diligence in terms of study, in terms of preparation and implementation, as opposed to responding to what might be artificial deadlines is probably not a great word, but an artificial pace is probably a better way to say it. So I would just like for all of us in our roles as leaders to understand that the scaling of a vision takes a little bit of time, and that to do it right, and we have a great opportunity with the blueprint, to do it right is going to take its deliberate pace.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. From the state board perspective, we recognize that what we're undertaking here is probably about a 7 to 10 year initiative.
Yeah.
Look at it over the long haul. Now,
Thank
within
you.
that time frame, it's figuring out then what are reasonable milestones and measures along the way. But as we look at this and as we position ourselves, is how do we build the capacity? How do we build an enduring infrastructure to implement something like this over a 7 to 10 year period? I mean, that's really what we're talking about. We're really serious about this. So how do we then work it? So from the standpoint of the public and everything, we're going to need to be able to show them interim results or at least progress towards the goal. But it's for us, I think, to really be focused on, as you said, this is not going to be solved tomorrow. And we need to be honest and direct about that. Let me just continue to get comments. Anybody else with comments? Yes,
Board
Dr.
President, I did want to circle back to,
Yes,
you know,
please.
as I initially talked about, for instance, the success of the Maryland Leads and how it's allowing us an opportunity to solve some issues that we had to address long ago. But there are specific key areas in that we have to look at differently, like, for instance, the special education teacher shortage. While we've been dealing with the teacher shortage or educator shortage every year, even more so this year, we have got to think about that area specifically. We're required by law to be able to provide students, as we should, all of the services that they are expected to get and need to receive a quality education. So that special education teacher is a very important factor as a part of that. So I think and thank you so much for talking about the timeline of it, as we continue to outline some key components of our work together, we also want to pull out those specific threads that are within those issues that we're trying to solve to be even more strategic around those key areas. And like I said, while we're talking about teacher retention, we've really got to map out something together around how we bring more special educators into the pipeline. And in terms of thinking about an opportunity for us, and I like to say for us, because it's really difficult to say, what can the state board do to improve? The state board is, you know, it's all about the collaboration that we have together, the state boards with the local boards and the superintendents and MSDE, our state superintendent, we all do the work together. And something that we have been thinking about a lot, my Board of Education members and I, is how do we have our own strategic plan that we have developed, as we should, that's very focused on the key learning that we want students to engage in and be successful with, as long as other areas of focus in Montgomery County Public Schools. But as I think about the state strategic plan, we want to think about how there's alignment in that work. Again, just to make sure that we are aligned in MCPS with the blueprint, our strategic plan, and our work plan should also be one that supports the state plan. So, you know, that's just one area I thought, and I couldn't even, again, frame it under just an improvement for the state board, but I think that's something that we should all really look at and think about, just to ensure that alignment is there.
Yes, absolutely.
Please.
Please.
Let me jump in as well and provide an additional voice regarding the teacher crisis that we're experiencing. And when you ask us state board members, what can we do to help? I think the biggest challenge right now facing public education is the pipeline. that the blueprint on paper is fantastic. If we don't have great people to deliver those expectations, this all falls apart. And I know what I just said is not that profound. It is something that we have been predicting for years that has been exacerbated further by COVID and the exodus. And I'm just going to share some local data with you. We had board member Morrow attend one of our board meetings, and I had the opportunity to speak to her individually, about the challenges associated with this. Howard County has fared extremely well in terms of the staffing issue, but the information that I think the state board needs to understand is how did we fare well from that was a very aggressive recruitment effort. But then when I offered open contracts early in the hiring season, a number of those teachers were from other counties in the state of Maryland. And that causes me great consternation with my colleagues that I should not be robbing Peter to pay Paul. We've got to look at this issue systemically. And I would really encourage us outside the conversation, the blueprint, which is devoted to issues associated with teacher recruitment. It's at a deeper level now more than ever. It truly keeps me up late at night. How we're going to now get ahead of this for the next year, and what are those best practices that the state can do as far as programming offerings, what Dr. Bedell talked about, breaking down some of the certification challenges. There's those barriers that are really necessary to address aggressively to assist us because the pipeline is diminished. Not to mention what Dr. McKnight talked about, our incredible focus on the diversification of our workforce and understanding the challenges of young people not going into educational offerings at higher ed. This is the biggest issue that keeps me up late at night constantly, and I know my colleagues do. It does as well. But how can we really galvanize around this at the state level beyond what is included in the blueprint? And I'm going to continue my work locally at a very accelerated pace, but that should not be at the expense of my colleagues. Based upon the fact of my ability to be able to be attracted because I might have a higher salary or whatever that may be for certain individuals. So we really need to have that honest conversation about that. Thank you for the time.
Absolutely. I want to just now give our superintendent an opportunity to comment, and then Dr. Getty and Dr. Wilcox. If there are any comments from first?
I don't have anything other than I'm really here to listen. I think, in terms of, I've said this before, like if Colmar is in the way of any big ideas to solve intractable issues, then we need to redo Colmar. I mean, or I'm coming to you for a waiver, state board, and I'm going to ask you to, support a smart pilot, whether it was to give our conditionally certified teachers an extended window and things like that. But, on the crisis of teaching as a profession that is most sought after, like Dr. Martorano said, and Dr. McKnight, these were years in the making, teacher prep, a third of people, enrollment decrease in our teacher prep programs. We're a high import state, not every county's quest to get to 60,000 is very different. Every county has different county governments who, here you go, here's more on top of more. And then others are like, I'm going to give you the bare minimum, and they have to deal with that challenge as well. So, I've told the assembly, like, we got to get to 60 real fast and make sure it's not in the way of any single school system, whether it be Dorchester, Kent, and all the way up. But on the teacher shortage challenge piece, we really do need to think big here. I think there needs to be things on top of Blueprint. I don't think Blueprint in and of itself, that's the promise of career ladder, right? But in terms of coming into it, we got to think bigger, and so like for special education, like we should be thinking, like we should be paying them a premium to come into our systems and everything and give our systems the dollars needed, and things like this. So that's going to be a priority of mine. I'm going to, I try to push on that through Maryland Leads as much as possible. But again, those are one-time dollars. We got to find a permanent fund for that. So those are things that are big and top of mind. But like I said, state board, and I've told the colleagues, if Colmar is in the way of something, to doing something really big, or a smart pilot, we need to fix Comar. I mean, that's just, that's what it is. So, so just, I appreciate our systems constantly pushing us and thinking to do that. So.
Thank you. Dr. Getty, any comments, thoughts? Okay. Dr. Wilcox.
No, thanks.
No, and just to reiterate, I think the focus that we have is more on policy related solutions. And so thinking through any policy related initiatives that could potentially help some of the issues that you've been bringing up.
I'll just say on our relationship with the AIB, we're working very hard to build a very constructive relationship. We're making very good progress. We've had a number of meetings with and ongoing conversations with the AIB. And I'm pleased that they too are focused on educating children. So we're trying to figure this out. As you know, we're working on a strategic plan. We'll begin to roll some of that out in the coming months. Part of that strategy involves heavy engagement from you. You are as far as I'm concerned, you're the owners. So helping us figure out then how do we actually do these things. So we'll be looking greatly to you for ideas and suggestions as we move forward. So again, we're working through that. We move to the second question is, and we've touched upon that a little bit. What can we do to help you? What can we do to help you? I find these conversations, I'm not an education person, so I find these conversations to be extremely helpful.
I think
Suggestions. Yes.
I would just start off by saying that I think as 24 districts and the state, we need to look at the teacher shortage not only through the lens of salary, but also through the lens of working conditions. And I know that that's part of another portion of what the blueprint tries to address. But I think, today, teachers are responding to increased demands, and those demands keep increasing, and accountability keeps increasing, and their responsibility keeps increasing. But from what I hear from teachers, they don't always feel like they have, or educators, they don't always feel like they have much authority in the situation in which they find themselves. And so I think one thing that would help is perhaps looking at having more conversations with our state educators and hearing directly from them about what's going well, what's not going well, and for those that are leaving the profession, why they're leaving. Because I think, like I said, some of it goes back to salary, but I think there's a lot more to that story.
Very good, thank you.
President Crawford, Derek Simmons, Caroline County.
Yes, sir.
I want to connect to Dr. Wilcox's comment and a little bit to Dr. McKnight's from the last question about help that could be provided. And really from the policy lens or any initiative lens that comes out of the state as the state creates the strategic plan. We each have our own internally we work on, just as Dr. McKnight mentioned. But I would just ask that the state board, in terms of looking to provide that help, recognize the nuanced differences that do exist amongst all 24 counties. We are 24 who all work really well together, really closely together. We all have the same goal in mind. We all see what the blueprint can provide. We all have the same goal for all of our kids, but it is a very different landscape and picture that exists in Caroline County that may exist differently in some other counties across the state. Again, we all have the same goal, but there's implications associated with every policy that comes out, with every initiative, and each of us has to respond to each differently. Some have personnel that they can draw from to respond to that initiative when it comes out. Some have to find ways to put that onto someone else's plate. and it becomes a new responsibility for someone else. So as we layer new things on, I'd ask the state board to continue to look at what are those implications fiscally and personnel wise on systems of different sizes. I don't pretend to know the pains that our larger systems face with personnel, but I'm sure they're very similar in terms of the problems are still there with the impacts of those. And again, just ask the state board to consider that as we're looking at finding solutions to problems and improving education, that we don't create new problems with new solutions.
Absolutely. If you have suggestions, as the superintendent has said, if you have suggestions about COMAR regs or other things that may have been, or requirements that may have made sense 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but today maybe they don't make as much sense, let us know, because we're, from the state board perspective, we're more than happy, if necessary, to go back to the legislature and try to talk to them about getting some legislative relief. So as you see these things, bring them to our attention.
Mr. Crawford?
Yes.
Can I just say one thing? It's not solicited. I want to say it anyway. I really appreciate, the state board, Mr. Shotery's leadership through, frankly, particularly the back end of COVID. I think, the first 6 months or so, everybody was so afraid, might be the best word, that it just seemed like whenever we made a decision, I'm only speaking for one county with 15,000 students, but I really feel like the community gave us the benefit of the doubt early on. And as the pandemic evolved, and some of the decisions became much more political and with anger on both sides, that's when the decisions to me became particularly difficult. And so I'd just like to give you all credit for kind of hanging in there and, staying focused, doing what you thought was the right thing at the right time. And I'm sure you probably got an email or two expressing some concern along the way, like we did. But I give you all credit for staying resolute, trying to do the right thing. And that probably doesn't get said to you all enough.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Any additional comments about things that we can do? Superintendent, on this issue of reporting requirements, the strategy and the blueprint, would you just talk a little bit about what we're trying to do to try to harmonize those, to make sure that that we're very sensitive to trying to eliminate as much duplication as we go forward?
Sure. So a couple of things. We recently did, well, some of it is also, so one, lots of reports. It's important to remember there's also reports to the feds. So just because we have a blueprint doesn't mean Secretary Cardona is like, you don't have to do this anymore. So let's remember that piece. But there's some things that we're finding, things that we can collapse and efficiencies. We recently took something called the ESSA plan, the Every Student Succeeds plan that every district has to do, something called a master plan. And we found ways to, thin out or cut out duplicative work that they were required to do over the years. And so that got unveiled recently, for example. I'm pushing for a different approach to how their blueprint plans get submitted. I can't say too much right now, but I believe that a single submission at one point in time in a few months, that is called March, is not the way to go about it. I think they should really have a year-long runway to submit their plans around this. And if we're going to expect the world, we should provide the world of support. And I'm going to hang my hat on that. So I don't want to be loud about it today here, but trust me, I want to be loud about it. And the superintendents have gotten some level of indication of this for me. I try to do it with CCR and the timeline there, but we're gonna, as much as possible, where we can consolidate reporting. Right now we're also living in an era of reporting for the federal ESSER dollars. Rightfully so. We got to do that. We got to monitor that. So that's going to go away. And then there's new blueprint reports that come in. So we have a ton of reports, but they also have some reports. Like, for example, they recently submitted a report on their staffing practices and how that's contributing to or not helping to diversifying the professions, for example. And so I think there's always going to be room to consolidate. And wherever I can find that, trust me, I would. I have over 500 reports that I give to the assembly. I'm like, is anyone reading this? I need to go flag the assembly member down on this and say, hey, are you okay if we sunset this? But in terms of other reporting and things like that, we're trying to see where, like, your language here can count for language here, right? And your language here can count for language here. So therefore, we'll do the work and go ahead and grab that language and do that versus making you regurgitate that back. And so, but the biggest thing for this year, they know, the public knows, is their blueprint plans that are due, and that's due in March as currently defined. I think we need to think of that submission a little differently, and plan to talk more about that in the coming months. So that's where we're at in terms of reporting and things like that.
Great. Again, we're very interested in the regulations. You have to have regs. I got that. But I think the board is also very interested in, are there opportunities, further opportunities to provide incentives rather than always the stick? Can we provide, as the superintendent said, can we provide incentives? Can we provide flexibilities for pilots? Can we waive certain things? So just want to go on record to be very clear that the state board is very open to hearing new ideas and different approaches and providing, obviously with the flexibility, there's an accountability component to it, but we're very open to those kinds of conversations. So if you've got ideas or suggestions around those lines, please feel free. Before we transition to our final area, General Sumter has been able to join us. Welcome, General Sumter. How are you doing? Did you want to make any comments or anything?
I'd like to apologize for being late. Don't know if Clarence shared with you, we had a large tree come down on one of our two historic homes that the Historical Society has in the county. And I had to make immediate arrangements for someone to cut down the tree and cover the roof. But I apologize, and I'm so sorry I wasn't here for the entire meeting.
Thank you. Welcome. We fully understand. Okay, well, let's just move to the final area where we just begin to really talk about, everyone says that we want to improve educational opportunities for our children. Let's talk a little bit about how do we get there? What your thoughts about areas where we can collaborate, where we can improve communications, or whatever the case may be, with the goal of supporting our children. And again, I just want to mention that we're doing these roundtables, but you're going to see over the course of this school year a considerable amount of engagement. A lot of it's going to be related to the strategic plan. We're trying to get out of Baltimore to spend time with you, to understand, to listen and understand. So let me now just open it up to any comments or ideas about things that we can do to improve that collaboration, to help us better understand and be in a better position to support you in being successful.
Thank you.
Just add a few things.
Yes, Dr. Salfer.
Thank you. I would just say, as a new superintendent, I am right in the middle of the community engagement phase of coming into this position. So I'm seeing and hearing a lot. in these last couple of months, but what I am seeing and what I'm hearing, I think myself and everyone strongly believe in the work we're doing. We believe it's the right work, that Maryland is going down that path. We've found some success in Wycomico County, specifically through the Community Schools Initiative. It's engaging more parents, and the resources that we're able to use to do that has been very helpful. The LEADS grant for us in Wycomico has been very helpful and has been a benefit to us. I would say that also what I'm seeing and hearing is that this work is so comprehensive, just keeping in mind to segment as we go forward and kind of timeline that, and as well as being sure to coordinate the messaging that we're hearing from MSDE and the AIB. I know it's new work, but sometimes those messages are mixed at times as we're trying to determine our path. And I would just say to make sure that local school systems are engaged in the process as much as possible while the work's being defined. I'm also very interested in talking with Mr. Chaudhary just about middle school, middle grade levels in general, and always interested to learn more, because I think Wycomico is not alone in that we certainly see student growth diminish in those middle grades, specifically between 5th through 9th grade. And we're doing and hearing so many great things about early childhood initiatives through Blueprint and all of the college and career readiness initiatives through Blueprint, but strongly feel that if we can continue to strengthen those middle grades, that we'll see success as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ms. Baker.
Yes, I think this is a great start in improving communication and towards your goal of really hearing from us and hearing from stakeholders across the state. And of course, I absolutely love the taking your show on the road to other areas of the county as being your furthest westernmost county. And I also wanted to take an opportunity, Dr. Simmons summarized the issues of our smaller districts. I've never worked in a larger district, so I know they have their own challenges, but any flexibility that can be provided to knowing that our districts vary in size so much, any flexibility, even in our capital needs, we're really facing some difficult decisions here in Garrett. And so, any flexibility that the state board can help us with would be much appreciated. But I do think this meeting, this is a great start, and I really do appreciate the time, and I've really enjoyed hearing from my colleagues as well.
Thank you. Dr. Bedell, and then Dr. Knight, and then Dr. Maturano.
And just a couple of things. I'm really excited about the Blueprint plan, and I think it does address what I deem as a significant amount of inequities that may exist based on where school districts reside, the type of issues that they're having to deal with, the difficulties that you may have in certain communities based on socioeconomic status. And I know that there's a strong focus on that. As I've been starting to get out and executing my 100-day plan, one of the things that I continuously say to people is, just because it's not your community doesn't mean that it's not your problem. I think the same when we talk about the state board and how do we make sure that we're doing everything we can to ensure that all kids in the state of Maryland succeed. We all have to come together and realize, just because it may not be our district or it may not be our community, every problem that exists within different communities within this state, we all feel it. So the more that we could come together in a unified voice, that we're all in this together, the 24 of us, in addition to those of you down at MSDE, I think that will show some alignment and some collaboration, and it'll be hard to tear us apart.
Thank you. Thank you. I think Dr. McKnight.
Yes, thank you. There are two things that are on my mind as we think about how we can improve the conditions for students. And then I'm also reflecting on your comments earlier about what traditions and COMAR things are in place that we really need to look at. that proves a pretty good projective of path moving forward. And there are two things that come to mind. One, and I'm going to speak specifically about the impact in Montgomery County. The wealth index sometimes doesn't do a good enough job really identifying the diversity in need. And we felt that in Montgomery County specifically. I'll go on to say it too often groups our diverse county into a monolith of wealth. When that's frankly just not the case. And sometimes I believe that when we look at the resources and funding for students, we're using a funding formula that was put in place 20, 30 years ago. I mean, I know for our county specifically, it looks very, very different today. And so while there may be some wealth that have existed in some ways, there's been more need that has come about over the past decade, and that's something that we should look at. So I wanted to lift that up as a specific area that we could focus on and think about how we do that. The other that comes to mind is the school calendar. And I'll start by saying last year, grateful again for the state board, and we're very happy to work with you and our state superintendent on the requirement last year when we were able to have some flexibility with looking at utilizing virtual days when it came down to weather. And we know that was very, very different. Our students had a very strong opinion about that. We had a strong opinion about what we wanted to accomplish, but I think we got to exactly where we needed to be, which is oftentimes falling right within reason. But when I look at that 180-day requirement, I think we need to look at learning by instructional need and not just seat time. And I think that there are going to have to be some innovative things that we're doing, and we're trying some different things that will allow us to be able to help determine exactly what that learning time looks like. And most importantly, what are we learning from that learning time that says that that time is in fact increasing student learning? And it may not look the exact traditional way that it has in the past. Now, I think that's a huge part for us to look at, because when we think about the history of school calendar, we know that was developed upon, and I say this as, a Southern girl, a calendar that really was developed on farming and things like that, but today I think we need to look at what type of calendar works for students and be able to have some flexibility in terms of what that looks like at a wider scale. So I just wanted to put those two things together. And in terms of how we can even work together and communicate more around that, I wanted to put this out there. How great would it be for us to be able to maybe coordinate something where we're having some specific, some staff from whether it may be state board, MSDE, come out and work with us in the district specifically on some of these types of really big rocks that we need to look at differently. And that's going to take some time. It's not something that we're going to do in 1 or 2 meetings, but I mean, I would see it as, a project in which we could look at over a year or two and be able to really tell a story about what we've learned. Because that's what's going to tell us what's worth our investment of time and resources on behalf of our students being successful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Very good. Dr. Martirano?
I didn't intend to bring this up, but since Dr. McKnight did in terms of the calendar and weather, thank you for the opportunity to have a plan that we can respond to for virtual inclement weather days. I mean, we've been talking about this for years, and we now have a plan. It's moving through at the local level for us in Howard County to take full advantage of the synchronous and asynchronous days to help us manage the calendar, because we all know that the quality instruction is not happening at the end of the school year on those last couple of days that we would like to happen. So I really appreciate that option. As you were asking about this last question, Mr. Crawford, regarding improving communications, you used the word harmonize. And like everything else in our business, when there's something new introduced, there's growing pains. And I would encourage in the future, I'm extremely appreciative to have my colleagues on this meeting with our state superintendent and representative of the state board. But I believe in the future, it'd be nice to have representatives from the AIB so that level of harmony can continue. Because I believe at the local level, there is still that trepidation on our part to understand what is the role of the AIB, the possibilities of who do we actually report this information to. And that's been discussed at the local levels with superintendents. So the clarity of expectation from both bodies or all three bodies per se, MSDE, State Board, and AIB, as an opportunity to foreshadow the future, I think would be helpful for us to have dialogue with them too. So thank you for your time and your leadership.
Thank you, thank you. I think even with Superintendent, correct me, I believe we had a couple of AIB board members actually facilitating a couple of our roundtables of trying to get them involved.
That is correct. That is correct. You're throwing me off every time you say superintendent. There's a lot of them in here. But yes, that is correct. We've done that, but I think he's pushing further on this. Just being able to make sure there's just clarity. Trust me, I have two boards in a sense. And so I've told you guys that you are my true board. Don't forget that. But at the end of the day, there are two boards navigating, and it's not typical to have that. And so what that looks like, and I recently, I appreciated, I really did. We got a set of questions from Pazam around like, hey, AIB and MSD, can you give us one answer on this? And so I appreciate it. So we're chugging away at those. So there isn't, and we've heard this from the local board members as well. Their board members who have said like, hey, how do we do this? And how do we report on this? So, and ultimately we're going to have to take the initiative to bring that clarity. I'm just going to say it. We really are. And I put it on myself directly, like as part of my day-to-day responsibilities. So that's going to matter and big time. I think, yes, we've had them in roundtables, but I'm talking more so like, they're going to be negotiating the career ladder. There's a lot of gray in the law. You have to interpret and make that gray black and white. And once you make it black and white, it gives them the tools to be able to negotiate clearly versus fight. and that's an example of something that's coming on the horizon. And because if there's too much gray, sometimes gray is good because you allow for innovation. Sometimes gray is not good because you allow for trepidation and argument. And so I think those are some things that we're trying to figure out and sooner rather than later, especially that's why I have some thoughts on this March submission and what it looks like given everything else. Because we were supposed to have a normal year last year, but it was a year back to in-person with contact tracing and closures and masking and other things as well. And now we know so much more about COVID. And then we all had that horrible January of Omicron. And so here's to what hopefully that much more normal year, while also coming up with their bold blueprint implementation plans as well. So, but yes, I hear that loud and clear. Trust me, it's on my mind every day.
Additional comments?
I would just like to piggyback on something that Dr. McKnight brought up, and that is funding, and specifically funding for Blueprint. I'm very concerned that in Carroll County, we won't be able to fund all of the areas of the Blueprint, as we'll have to use the funding we have to get to the 60,000. And so, we're in a situation here where we're trying to put our heads together and figure out how we will fund the other portions of Blueprint. Our local funding is already above MOE. And so that's just something to be aware of. We want to be able to do everything that we are supposed to do, and we believe in what the Blueprint is going after. But we do have a funding issue here with Blueprint.
Thank you. Any additional comments? What about Worcester County? Do you guys have anything, any thoughts?
Yes, thank you, President Crawford. I want to first thank you for your leadership in the state board. We too share many concerns. That today, every time I was getting ready to say something, someone else addressed the issue. I'm privileged to serve my 7th year as superintendent, and I work with just outstanding and brilliant colleagues. And so to hear the comments they've made today. They have done it so well. And certainly two key components that I want to just share or reiterate, really, it's been said already, is the communication piece, and the timing of the communication is paramount. If we can get that out. We too enjoy working with Superintendent Chowdhury here in Worcester County, and things, we don't really have any major concerns. We're a small county, obviously, like Barbara is down in Garrett. But the more we can communicate, the more we can build sustainable relationships. When I say that, I mean relationships of trusting each other.
Yes.
I think we're able to move our system forward much rapidly and efficiently and effectively moving forward. I think one of my colleagues mentioned today about the timing of testing data. We are data, like all my colleagues are, we're a data-driven county. We look at data continuously to make our decisions on everything we do. And sometimes the timing of that, for reasons I may not know, and I'm not pointing the finger, really throws us back a little bit. And so that is real critical as we move. I'm very concerned personally and professionally about the amount of testing we do with kids, because I saw that through last year through the pandemic, of which none had control of, the wear and tear it had on my teachers, the wear and tear it had on our kids, and even more than that, the wear and tear too on our community of parents with concerns. So as we balance that testing process, both internally and through the state, we need to make sure that we are taking a close look at it so that we don't face that burnout level with our testing programs here in Maryland. And also, again, to just reiterate that point of getting that data back to us. Dr. McKnight and Dr. Mortorano said we too here in a smaller county appreciate the flexibility with our calendar. We thank you for allowing us to take a look at that individually in our counties and in our state. My board also appreciates that as well. So overall, we are very pleased how we're going and how we've survived. And I again want to thank the state board for staying the course with us as we navigated these uncharted waters. But again, if I could say, in wrapping up, that communication piece and that timely communication is very important to us, as well as the relationship that we all need to build together to make sure that we're trusting each other's process to move our state and our individual counties forward. And thank you for your time today as well. And this is a great idea. I apologize. I want to also introduce my assistant superintendent. She got on early because I was in another meeting, and I had her sit right here so she could hear it today with me as well. But again, thank you for your time, and to my colleagues, outstanding remarks today. I'm so grateful to work with all of you. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. As we get ready to wrap up, let me just check. Are there any final comments from our local superintendents? Any final comments? Again, this is not the last time.
I just want to echo the words of my colleagues. Really appreciate the willingness of State Board and the State Superintendent to engage in such a meaningful way like today's roundtable. Certainly appreciate the effort to come out to the localities to engage our local school boards in these types of conversations. And I do share with my colleague in Carroll County the concern regarding local funding. In particular, in Washington County, we take great pride in leading, in particular, in all the areas, all 5 pillars of the blueprint. But we anticipate there will be some significant challenges and a heavy lift from a local standpoint pertaining to funding.
Thank you much. Okay. I'm going to go to our superintendent. Any final comments, sir?
Cheers to a great year with hopefully no variants. But we should not forget that there are just lingering effects of the pandemic when it comes to mental health and other things that didn't even, it was alluded to, but I know that is at the heart of every one of these leaders' minds. And it is something that is just, added responsibilities in addition to other things that we have turned our schools are. School is just not about reading and math anymore. It's also about how you get referrals and everything else. And that just wasn't a conversation as part of the lexicon, even though it was always there. And so we have to remember those things and how funding plays into that as well. They're not, Blueprint is increasing funding, but it also plays out differently in all of our counties. So it's important that we have that conversation. The only other thing I would share for now, the 180-day concept, I think, is overdue for a remix. I'm coming from a state where, it was minutes. Like every school system must have 76,500 minutes. You figure out how you deliver those minutes, and that's on you. And so, we had schools in my own district, because we had different bell schedules, where they had extra days because they met the minutes because they had a longer school day. They could use those days as free release days for students, and staff can have professional development, and you earmark that, and that allows that. And whereas the state, trust me, getting waiver letters, I'm like, it's just, those waiver letters are great, but at the end of the day, it's a compliance exercise. And so I really think we really need to look at that. Last I looked at it, I think there's a state law in my way, so I'm going to need that probably to change. But I think we really do need to look at that. This whole notion of you got to hit 180 days. The last days of school are very different, and so I think we need to look at that. So that's on the top of my list as well, to help cultivate more creativity and such. The last thing I'll say is every single person in this room, and then I know Dr. Bedell, we're gonna have this conversation. They've all embraced literacy, and I have been really grateful for them to really jump into that challenge. Some of them were already on this journey. Marilyn Lee's just further help support that. I know it's very important to the board. And so really getting all of our kids to be able to read by 3rd grade and providing the necessary support. So I'm really excited about that, because that's an obsession of mine. I have not been shy about that. And I know Dr. Bedell and I are going to have a conversation about that as well. And so I'm looking forward to continuing on that journey. And I will have to give one shout out. When I did do these shadows, one of my unique experiences was with Dr. Taylor out in Worcester. He made me get on a school bus and drop kids off with him. And I loved that experience. We did. We took a journey through Worcester County and we dropped off kids. We literally rolled up to people's houses, and it was awesome. But it also reminded me of just how varying the landscape is and how varying the needs are. And so I really appreciated that. I just had to call that out. It was one of my memorable experiences for my first year. And so happy to do it again. With that, I'll stop with my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Wilcox, did you have any closing comments?
Yes, I lead up thank you. I lead up a subgroup for the strategic plan that focuses on mental health and safety. And if that is at top of mind for any of you or folks who work with you in your district, please feel free to reach out. We would love to hear your thoughts or ideas, and in regard to student mental health and safety, but also adults who work in schools with students. Thank you so much for your time and all your feedback today.
Thank you. General Sumter?
Just hearing the end of the program's remarks, I'm so sorry I missed the first part. So I'll be reaching out to the staff at MSDE to help me get to the YouTube so I can see the entire dialogue today. Thank you all for participating. And as always, I think when we do speak to each other and with each other instead of at each other, we all succeed. Thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you, General Sumter. Dr. Getty.
Hi, I just want to thank everyone for attending today. It's been great to have you with us. I have a real quick question for Dr. Bedell about brought to my attention by a healthcare worker who had to flip-flop the elementary and the high school hours. Can you just give me a quick 2 sentences? How's that going for your county?
So we're learning a lot right now. Let me just say that. I think there's some traffic jams that have been created because of some of the shifts, and I think that's a conversation we're working with the county and even the state around addressing some of those lights. But it's been what, 3 weeks? We're in week 3 now, so I've shared with people in the first board meeting. It's just going to take time for us to get data to really be able to make some type of assessment on how well this is working for us or not. It's just kind of early.
Right. Okay, well, good luck with that.
Yes, thank you.
Mhm.
Again, I just want to thank you first for your service. You're doing an outstanding job. We really, really appreciate your leadership. Nothing is going to happen at the local level without your support and leadership. We appreciate everything that you've done. You brought us through some really, really challenging times. And we really look forward to continuing to work with you as we figure out how to actually implement this. And again, boy, wouldn't it be great if folks 100 years from now look back and say, boy, those folks from 2023 came together as a team and they made an incredible improvement in the education of the children in Maryland. I think we're right on the verge of that. It is within our grasp. Will it be hard? Yes, but I think it's doable. This is doable. So again, thank you for you to take time out of the middle of your schedule. You have insane schedules, and we really appreciate you taking time to talk to us. We will continue to have these conversations. And again, thank you for everything that you do, your leadership, your support, your teachers, your education professionals, and parents and everything for all that's being done to help educate the children in the state of Maryland. Thank you very much. Lindsay, let me turn it back to you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again so much for being here this afternoon. And we will follow up with an email to make sure you have the engagement interest form. You can invite us out to your districts. I'm really excited to head out to Allegheny County. We're going to a community school event next week, and we can come out to connect with your school communities as well. So the engagement interest form is in the chat for you. We'll also send that to you in an email because I know the chat goes away once we end the conversation. And we also invite your school communities and your districts to take our strategic planning survey so that your stakeholders can inform the development of the strategic plan as well. We want to hear input from as many Marylanders as possible to make sure we're all invested in co-creating this together.
I think we're up to about 27,000, is that right?
Yes, we've hit the 27,000 threshold. So 30,000 is next, and we will keep going. But you all have incredible influence in your cities and counties. And so if you can help us get more, that would be amazing. You know, we want to hear from your business leaders to your parents and your students. Basically, if you can read, you can take the survey. So we would love to have more participation in that. Thank you, President Crawford.
Thank you. Have a great day and a great school year. Thank you again for